Hi guys, I am this close to losing it because this is the third time I've filmed this video. The first time the lighting in here was terrible, and the entire time I was filming I was like, why do I look like a pale, pallid, sallow ghost? And it was because of the lighting. So I refilmed it, and then I was rewatching it after being like, yep, nailed that video. I had lipstick all over my teeth, and because it's like this plum colour, which I don't know, am I too old for this? I don't know, I don't care. I care a little bit, but not that much. Maybe I should have just posted a video where I had lipstick all over my teeth, but I haven't worn makeup for like 5 months, basically since coronavirus hit Australia and I've had to stay in my house. So I was like, the one day that I wear makeup and film myself, I'm not going to put it up just because I got lipstick on my teeth. So I'm going to redo it. We're all going to be cool. We're all going to be chill. And you're going to hear about the books that I read over the last few months. Now, I haven't posted in a while because, well, coronavirus. Everything's been topsy-turvy. We're in strict lockdown at the moment. Can't really leave the house. Can't really leave my children by themselves, you know. But I was talking to some bookish friends this morning because every year we read the Readings Prize shortlist together, and so that's being announced next week. So we'll just like getting revved up, and I keep doing this because I'm paranoid. I've still got lipstick on my teeth. I do. I think it's okay now. I'm sorry if it's still there. I don't think I can do this more than 3 times. Anyway, it made me miss filming so much more than I normally miss it, which is a lot. So I thought I would just, do a wrap up. Why not? So these are not, like, I can't even remember the order they're meant to be in, so I'm just going to talk about them. Okay, here we go. Ottilie, Colter and the Withering World. This is from Rhiannon Williams. It's book 3 in the Narrowway trilogy. She's an Aussie writer. This is out through Hardy Grant. And if you've watched my videos before, you probably know that I love this series. I don't want to talk too much about it because it's the final one. I don't want to spoil things for you, but basically it's a middle grade fantasy. It's action-packed. It's very feminist undertones and overtones. And Rhiannon and all her pals are like a real gang by this one, and fighting the big bad, and it was really fun, and I look forward to whatever this author comes out with next. Next one. This is a very shiny. Ooh, shiny. Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor, out through Harper Voyager here in Australia. This is a fantasy set in a post-apocalyptic Sudan, and it's basically, I would say it's much of what's happening in this book is an analogy for the conflict in Darfur, and to do with like genocide based on race and the weaponization of rape and how women are treated. So it's pretty intense reading a lot of it, but the author, she's American, but she is also Igbo. She talks about Igbo traditions as well, such as female genital cutting, of which she is very critical. And so this book, I liked a lot about it. It has been very controversial. I think a lot of Igbo readers have criticized Okorafor's critique of female genital cutting because she is so scathing. And then others have critiqued it because they feel like she is kind of erasing Sudanese experience by incorporating elements from other cultures into the fantasy world that is based on the Sudan. So there's a lot of super duper good productive stuff in this book, but I suppose it's good to keep in mind those other critiques as well while you're reading it. But essentially the story is like, it's not a very complicated story. It's about a girl who has powers and has to find them, basically, with the help of her friends and family. And yeah, so it was good in that regard. But yeah, some just worthwhile keeping in mind those other critiques while you read this one. So the next one, actually maybe this is a good one to talk about now. I just DNF'd this, but Eva and I were buddy reading it, The Vorrh by B Catling. This is a speculative fantasy novel set in Africa, and the Vorrh is a big mythical dark forest where like evil and good originate, and it's sort of like the dark mysterious energy of humanity encapsulated in Africa, which is a terribly problematic metaphor. It basically is like a 21st century version of Heart of Darkness, except maybe even worse, because this guy should have the benefit of hindsight, but he doesn't. Just reads like an old white guy writing a book who thinks he's being really progressive with all his like descriptions of violence and sexuality, but actually he's just perpetuating the same old racist tropes. So even when I stopped about 100 pages in, we recommend reading books about Africa that are actually about Africa and the material experiences of people there. So Eva had some own recommendations on her Instagram. I'll link her down below because she's great. Some more middle grade. The Lost Soul Atlas by Zana Fraillon. I think that's how you pronounce her surname. I'm not sure. She's Aussie. She is local. I think she even lives really close to me maybe. But I don't know. Don't quote me on that. This is out through Lothian. This just came out, and this is, I wouldn't call it a middle grade fantasy, but it has fantasy elements. So Twig, the main character, when the book starts, has just woken up in the afterlife, so he's already died. And so the quest that he needs to go on is to find these crossings that exist between the afterlife and the real world and open them up so that basically humankind can retain their memories and remain like ethical, essentially. I'm simplifying it a lot, but that's kind of the gist. And through this, he learns a lot of things about himself, because by waking up in the afterlife, he forgot all the stuff that happened to him in his actual life. I would say the main point of this book, though, is that in Twig's real life past, he was a street kid, and so a lot of this book is really focused on the lives of the street kids and their incredible like resilience and the strategic ways they have of negotiating life under like a real system that disadvantages them, and the structural barriers they face like every minute of their lives to trying to survive. So in terms of the discussion of the street kids' lives, this book was really good. The fantasy stuff I probably wanted more of. It felt a bit undercooked to me, but maybe that's personal preference. I don't know. The street kids stuff was valuable though, and I think it would be good for kids to read about. I just finished reading this actually, Fire Country by Victor Steffensen. This is out through Hardy Grant. He's a Tagalaka man, and he is an Indigenous fire practitioner. So he basically looks after the land and does land management and care by burning off, but in ways that really care for the landscape, care for the entire ecosystem basically, and all the different ecosystems that exist within the Australian landscape. And he also runs workshops for local Indigenous communities so that they can feel empowered to look after their land through practicing cultural burning. It was so fascinating and interesting, and the way he explains it, it just makes such sense. And that's not to downplay, like the knowledge that he has is obviously so deep and complex and has been learnt over like decades from elders before him. But, you know, the subtitle of this book is How Indigenous Fire Management Could Help Save Australia. And the way it comes across, it just feels like that's the direction that Australia must move in if we're to mitigate like the fire risk that, you know, considering the devastating catastrophic fires we had last summer and the catastrophic fire events we have every year, basically. I think this just feels like the direction we need to move in. But he does also outline like the difficulty in getting Western systems of government, even at a local council level, to adopt some of these practices. It's just so hard, and it's basically because of colonial legacy of not listening to Indigenous people. So anyway, hopefully this book helps out with that, with remediating that, because this it was really good. I recommend reading it if you can get your hands on it. In Australia, this will be easy to find, but if you're overseas, you might have to order it or read like an ebook version. But yeah, really recommend that one. Gifted to me by my cousin, and also accurate. I also read Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and it was awesome. I mean, what do I need to say about it? So yeah, I had never read any of her fiction before, actually, and yeah, loved it. It's probably my top read of the year. The only thing I didn't like about it was a little bit of, it was a plot-based issue, really, towards the end. I guess it's more about my personal preference of how love stories are often not resolved, but how they play out in a lot of books and TV shows and stuff, which kind of bugs me. But that's nothing to do with the actual core content of this book, which is about race and Black experience in America, and you know what it means to be a Nigerian who's immigrated to America, like what it means to be Black in America if you're Nigerian, what it means to be Black in America if you're American, or you know, from another country in Africa. How race functions in America, you know, the perils of migration for Nigerians to Western countries like the UK or the States. It was just so fascinating and insightful, and everyone should read it. That's all I have to say. Another one about race in America that was equally as good, but like devastating, was seeing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Wood. So this is about a family in Mississippi, mostly about the son of this family who has a Black mum and a white dad. And so it's him negotiating, basically being mixed, growing up mixed race in America, but in not poverty, but in a situation. So his mother is, and his parents are like terrible parents, drug use, neglect, abuse, like everything. But his grandparents are really great and look after him. So his mum's parents. So on the one hand, I would say this is about family relationships, but it's also and dysfunction. But the main core, I think, it would be, you know, the legacy of slavery and how its impact just leaves like compounded intergenerational trauma, and the way that the past continues to inhabit the present. It was very powerful. It's not that long, like you get through it pretty quickly, but the ending just, man, it got me. Every time I thought about it, like I couldn't read anything for a few days after this because I was just so devastated. It also felt like a big middle finger in a way to sort of the American canon of white male authors. Read it. It's good. It's upsetting and hard, but it's good. Powerful book. Really want to read her other stuff. I also read Too Much Lit by Melissa Lucashenko. So that's another Aussie one. It won the Miles Franklin last year. It's out through UQP. And that is the story of a Guri family on the northern coast of New South Wales, or maybe not the coast, but in northern New South Wales, who live in a tiny town. And it's on the one hand a story of just kind of the family dynamics and relationships in this particular family, but also some local land that is culturally theirs but legally belongs to a farmer or a developer, I can't remember. And it's about them trying to get their land back so they don't lose it to a development. And so there's that side of it too, negotiating like how they go about trying to get land back from a white run council and the difficulties associated with that. And I would say, yeah, it's really about the effects of colonization and institutionalized racism on this Indigenous family anyway, but I would say on Indigenous families more broadly today. But it was so richly drawn, like the characters, yeah, it was really good. Everyone's very flawed, but also admirable in other ways. It was really good. It was a really powerful book, and I'm glad it won the Miles Franklin last year because it deserved to win. Another middle grade was Bluecrowne, a Green Glass House story by Kate Milford. This is kind of fantasy, I guess, middle grade fantasy. So this, I would say, is a companion novel to the Green Glass House novels, or indeed any of Kate Milford's other novels, because they all take place in the same world and kind of around the same fictional town in Canada. Obviously the Green Glass House stories, if you've read them, take place now, and so this takes place a few hundred years earlier and follows the original inhabitants of that house. It's not actually about the house though, it's just about the people. And yeah, it was fun. There was mysteries and magical shenanigans, very well researched, so lots of detail about sailing, about fireworks, which happened to play a major part in the story, Chinese sort of mythology, because she has quite a lot of Chinese characters in her stories. And yeah, it was, I liked it. It does feel a bit disorienting at times because she often has, I think in all the books of hers that I've read, there are so many mysteries set up that and that you don't find out about. They're not answered until the end. So sometimes it feels a bit disorienting because you don't really know what's happening. And also because this is a companion book, it immerses you in the world without explaining much, and so that can be disorienting too. So I would recommend this if you've read Kate Milford's other books, but otherwise I would read her other stuff first before you come to this. But I enjoyed it. It was fun. More middle grade. Nevertell, Katherine Orton. This was her debut. I think she's British. She at least lives in the UK. I don't know if she's a British citizen. Regardless, she lives there. This starts off in Stalinist Russia. It follows an 11-year-old girl who escapes with some people from a forced labour camp. But her mum doesn't escape. And so most of the story is her and her friend trying to somehow rescue her mother. But the journey they go on to do that includes many magical adventures and shenanigans, most of which are based and taken from Russian folklore and fairy tales. So that's all really well done, really interesting. Prose is beautiful throughout, like really great prose stylist. And the only thing I would say about this is that sometimes it felt a bit rushed. And so, for example, the children go to this like ice palace, which looks beautiful on the cover and is incredibly evoked in the book, but only very briefly. Like they're there so quickly, and I was like, oh, I want more of the story to take place in these like amazing magical locations, but it kind of just rushes you through them a bit. And I love the pacey nature of it towards the end. It was a real page turner, but yeah, I suppose I just wanted a bit more of that magical stuff, which it kind of touched on, but I didn't feel like it delved into. But that said, I really enjoyed it, and I think she's got a new one coming out soon, which I would definitely pick up. Another one set in a cold climate is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. I read this for my friend's book club. Loved it. 5 stars. So this came out in 1969, and it is a sci-fi. It's set on a planet where biological difference doesn't exist, at least in the same way that it exists here. So on this planet, the inhabitants, or the humans, they have female and male biology and genitalia, but they only but most of the time it lies dormant, and only once a month do they either become a male or a female for like a breeding period. And yeah, because of this, it changes the entire way their society is structured, the way they think about equality and work and labour. It's really interesting, and the world building is really like so detailed, and you're so immersed in it. This just feels like one teeny tiny episode of this planet's like complex and rich history. But I would say it's not just about sex and gender. This is just kind of about notions and ideas about difference more generally, and how you might relate to others across, seemingly insurmountable difference, or maybe because of that difference you end up with other forms of similarity. I loved it. I would read it again. I feel like this is one of those books that you could reread and get a lot more out of. So yeah, especially considering it was first published in 1969. I mean, this would have been very wild at the time. But yeah, I loved that one. Another one I just listened to the audio of was, I keep wanting to say Jenny Odell's How to Do Nothing, which was great. Sometimes the narrator, so I think it's the same narrator that did the audible version of Educated by Tara Westover, and I remember at that time a lot of people didn't like that narrator because she kind of sounds a bit like Siri, a little computerized and monotone. But I found that once you got into the content of the book, you don't get distracted by the voice, and it's okay. And this was really great. It is, I think sometimes reviewers seem to have expected it to be a book about mindfulness, which the title kind of gives that impression, or about detoxing from social media. It's neither of those things, even though it sort of is about both of those things. She's more providing a framework for resisting capitalism. So when she talks about how to do nothing, she more means how to do things that aren't productive in the eyes of capitalism and profitable, basically. So mostly she's talking about the way that capitalism co-opts our attention and our time and optimizes it for profit, and how we might resist it by doing other things. Mostly the strategies she talks about are by paying attention to your local place and local people, and forming like reciprocal relationships. And I suppose she's talking about this because this form of resistance for her, like, in her analysis, and I found it very compelling, creates, you know, the space for more effective forms of activism and advocacy, but also just for better community building and fuller, more meaningful, richer lives. Yeah, so I thought it was really good. It's not perfect. Like, I feel like she doesn't really address how people who are already precariously employed under capitalism, like working multiple casual jobs, or single parents, or any parents, like, she doesn't sort of talk about how other difficulties in life might affect your ability to resist in the ways that she suggests. But I think the principles were really good nevertheless, and I recommend it. Next one was Who Put This Song On by Morgan Parker. So Morgan Parker's poetry is what she's well known for, and especially the one There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce. I remember that was really popular on BookTube. I haven't read her poetry, but my friend who lent me this book has, and she also lent me this book. It's a YA. I liked it. It's about a girl called Morgan. I think Morgan Parker draws heavily on the details of her own life to write this one. So she considers herself emo through the way she dresses and the music she listens to, and that's all really nicely referenced and evoked throughout the book. But she lives in a very white suburban part of Southern California, and so the story is about her negotiating, like, her late teenage life. Yeah, as a black emo girl in, you know, a very white, sort of bland suburban context. And so it's a lot about the, you know, the daily racial microaggressions that she faces, and macroaggressions. Some of it's pretty hard to read, but also, like, working through friendships, stuff with boys, drugs, sex, you know. It was a good YA. I liked it. Oh, there was also The Enchanted Wood, by Enid Blyton. I've listened to it, I think, in the last few months, twice on audio, and read it almost through in the hard copy for my 3-year-old who loves it. And yeah, it's great fun. Kate Winslet narrates the audio, and she's obviously a great narrator. Obviously, also, of course, with Enid Blyton, there's often problematic stuff. And in this case, I mean, mostly The Enchanted Wood's okay, because mostly they just get to go to magical lands and eat cakes and different types of pastries, which is really nice. But there are these goblins that take over the magic faraway tree, who were, like, inherently mischievous and a nuisance. And so the gang, like the kids and them, Moonface and Silky and everyone, capture all the goblins and send them off to be servants to this wizard, because they think that deep down the goblins really just want to be servants, and that will help, like, rein in their mischievous natures. So yeah, the whole idea of this species that is inherently servile was pretty problematic, but a really good talking point and something to, like, make sure I discuss with my child as she grows up. So in that regard, that's kind of good too. Oh, I also read Child of God by Cormac McCarthy I tried to count. I think I don't know how many times I've read it. A lot of times, front to back, and then many more times as I write about it for my thesis. That is about a rapist and murderer who hides the bodies of the women he kills in a cave in the mountain. That's a very simplified version of the story, but it's not a nice story. There's nothing pleasant about it, not one thing, but in my thesis I'm arguing that the gender politics are not good, but I also think it's a complicated book that has other productive stuff going on. So if you've never read any Cormac McCarthy, I probably don't recommend. Well, you can start with that one. It's not very long, but it's not like. I would probably recommend starting with other books first. But if you have read, you know, the Border trilogy and Blood Meridian and The Road, like this, you probably know a bit more what to expect and the types of themes and ideas that McCarthy's interested in. Yeah. So that's all that I got through in the last few months. Hopefully I'll be back soon. Maybe I'll try and make a video every week, but we'll see how I go. At least while I've got the capacity. I might even split this into 2 videos. Okay, guys. Bye.